Well, welcome to our next lecture on Kuzari, and we just finished one of his famous sections on the importance and significance of the land of Israel, the special holiness of it, and the mitzvah the to live there, and how special it is, the spiritual environment there, etc. So now in 25, which is we are in Mamar Hasheni, that is the second essay, about to study paragraph 25, um, and um, the Kuzari, in other words, the Chazar king, is going to change the subject. So Amar Kuzari, says the Chazar king. Zeb Maspik, and remember, on the Korobkin version, that is this book here that many of you have, it's page 185. And when I read the Hebrew, I'm reading from this version, Michael Schwartz, his modern Hebrew translation from the Arabic, and so on. Amar Kuzari, says the Chazar king. Zeb Maspik Libin. This is enough for me discussing this topic. We talked a lot about Israel. Maybe we'll come back to it a little bit later, but got it. I got the message. All right. So now, I would like for you to make clear to me, to lighten up, to shine some light on this issue here, which I read about the sacrifices. And it's hard for the mind, the brain, to understand what's going on here. Like it says, as korboni lachmi, it says in Bamidbar, in Bamidbar 28, my sacrifice, lachmi, my bread, liishai, for my flames, reach nichochi, the scent that comes up to me, the special wondrous scent. Tishmeru, you should be careful, akri believe moado, to bring it to me in its proper time. This is actually referring to the carbon tamid, the sacrifice that's brought on a daily basis. Who omer al ha-karbonos, it seems to be saying, regarding the karbonos, regarding the sacrifices, shehem karbonos Elohim, that they are actually sacrifices to God, mizono, and they're his food, numashu, and this is what he smells. It's the way it's being described. It sounds like God is sitting there in his kitchen, smelling the fire and eating the food that we're giving him on the mizbeach, which is certainly the way early pagans understood the sacrifices. But it doesn't make logical sense. Like what's going on? So what is the Torah talking about? Those of us that were with me when we studied Rambam together know that the Rambam devoted a significant amount of writing to the purpose of the karbonos, what they meant, what they were for, and so on. So now Rabbi Yehuda Levi is going to deal with it, and he's going to deal with it in a very different way, but still very interesting and important for us to read. So let's dive in. So Amar Chaver, this is paragraph 26. Says the Chaver, the rabbi gives his answer to the question. It's going to be a long answer, so get ready. Okay, I'm warning you. Don't say you weren't warned. Li'ishai mekel kol shoshi. When it says the word li'ishai, for my fire, right? That is really the key to unlocking the wisdom of all of this subject. And by this subject, he's going to refer to all of the avoda, all of the worship that is related to the temple. So the incense, the sacrifices, the showbread, the menorah, the priestly service, the service of the Levite, and the whole thing. But the key to understanding it all is the word li'ishai, when it says, for my flame. Now, what is this flame? I'm going to warn you, and I'm going to try to do my best to describe as we read through this that a lot of Rabbi Yehuda Levi's explanation is going to be drawing upon the medieval understanding of human physiology, right? And the attachment between the spirit and the spirit or the soul and the physical body, right? This is a conundrum that was in medieval philosophy, was of course a very difficult one. Like how is it that our bodies are both a spirit, both have some life force, and they're also physical creatures, right? And the way the medieval thinkers thought of this, I'm giving you this a little bit of an introduction, is that that our bodies are made up of all of the organs, of the body, right? And and there's also a spirit, and there's a place, something that attaches them, that brings them together, right? And that place, there was something that was called by Galen, who was a very important who was really the father of medieval medicine, and for almost 1,000 years, his works were what doctors used. Galen, he was a Roman philosopher slash physician. I think he lived in the 3rd century or somewhere around there. But this innate life force, right, that he believed resided in the heart, and consisted of an innate heat. So the life force, there was a heat, there was like a flame or a fire burning in the heart, right? And that fire was where the life force connected with the physical body, with the physical unit called the heart. And the heart kind of was the center, and it pumped that life force throughout the body. Galen, interestingly, or Galen, I'm not sure how to pronounce it properly, was the first person to discover really that the heart pumps blood through the arteries and then it flows out. He didn't understand the circulation. He didn't realize how it gets back to the heart, but he did experiments. He was one of the first to try to do experiments, of cutting an artery and seeing that the blood is flowing. He would do that on monkeys and stuff. And he figured out that the heart was pumping blood. So through the blood, this life force is pumped throughout the body. And the way they understood respiration, when we breathe, that was the way we needed to breathe in order to cool off the innate heat of the heart. They understood that from the heart, the heat would pump to the lungs through the blood. They understood that. And they figured that the lungs was the place where it was cooled off. And if we didn't cool it off, right? On the other hand, how do we feed that flame, right? Just like if you have a flame, you have a wick and there's oil, and the flame is fed by oil, right? And then that oil connects the flame to the wick, right? And then the heat comes out and goes to whatever's around it. So the fuel that's necessary to feed the heart is the food and drink that we eat and drink, right? This was Galen. This is how he understood some basic human physiology, and it's very important to understand that in order to understand what Yehuda Levi is about to say. And a lot of what he's going to say is based on medieval medicine, right? What we can extrapolate and gain from his speech, about the carbonot is something that we're going to try to gain from it. Obviously, we're not going to learn medicine from him, right? But we will hopefully be able to learn something about the function of carbonot, while he describes it to us in his way. Incidentally, there's a lot of people, have shown that a lot of the medicine that's found in the Talmud also relies on a lot of Galen's thinking, depending on when and what, but there's statements like that. But that's a subject, big subject for another time. But anyway, hu omer shahakarbon hazeh, right? So what God is saying when he said it's for my flame, he's saying that this carbon, this sacrifice, v'halechem, and the bread, v'rech nichach, and the smell, hamiyuchasimli, which we are attributing to me, the purpose of them is not for me, but it's li'ishai, it's for my flame, right? Kolomar, le'esh hanefeles al pi devaro yisala, right? And what this flame that comes about through God, right? How did the flame get to the Mizbeach, at least in the first temple or in the tabernacle? It came from heaven and began on the Mizbeach, on the altar. Asher mizona, and what feeds the flame? What is the fuel for the flame? It's carbonot, it's the sacrifices. After the Mizbeach, the altar gets its portion, then the priests would eat their portion, what's left over. Hamatarahi, the goal being, Haseder Hatov Shabo Shor HaMelech, is that there should be this proper order so that the king should be able to reside within the people. Okay? So he's gonna develop this, but I'm giving you hints so we understand when he reads it. But what he's gonna develop is the same way, right? The soul and the spirit resides within our body, right? Because we feed that flame that's in our heart, and then that spirit that the Holy Spirit the gets attached. The spiritual aspect of our lives becomes attached, right? And then is able to spread throughout and bring the life force throughout our body. In the same way, the actions that we do in the tabernacle or in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, and then presumably nowadays when we do all mitzvot and we worship God, we are bringing God's presence so that the flame of God's presence can be spread from the temple, or from the holiness that we do in this world throughout the entire community, throughout us, through our community, and throughout the world. So b'mashal adavar aloki. So because, for example, let's look at this as a mashal, as a parable for this, the Spirit of God, to the soul that thinks, that being that thinks something. There is an I somewhere in our, well, we think of it as in our brain. Now remember, in medieval philosophy and medieval medicine, they understood that the brain functions as a place that controls, that has a place where our thoughts reside, like our memories reside. But they didn't understand the brain as the boss of the whole body. They understood the heart, right? The notion that the heart was simply a pump that pumps blood around was not known in medieval medicine until I think it was mid 1600s, when I forgot his name, a scientist in England at the time figured out the circulation of the heart. If somebody could look that up, I forgot his name. It's a famous doctor who figured that out. But it wasn't until the 17th century when that was realized. Until then, a lot of people thought that the heart, like we use the term heart as a place of emotions and stuff, but we know, you and I both know, that there's no emotions going on in the heart, right? Everything is in the brain. They didn't understand that then. Anyway, but
was it Harvey?
yes, William Harvey. Thank you for telling me that.
Harvey, that's who it was.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, when he discovered that, it changed, it changed a lot. But again, that's a little subject for another time. But it is important for us to know how he's thinking. So, kasher tiva'av me'uzanim v'kochosav asholtim. So, how is it that this spiritual, the thinking soul that we have, should somehow, right, reside within this physical body of ours, Bahami, which is this animal body of ours? Kasher tiva'av me'uzanim, we know that when right, that when this special soul, this thinking soul, is properly residing within us, we are then on a higher level than the animals, right? Because we're able to think. Our thought process, the spirit that's within us. The animals have some sort of life spirit in this scheme, right? But ours is much higher because we have the capability of thinking and deducing things and understanding things, etc. Right? So how is it, right, that this is attached to our physical bodies, which is really the same as an animal? So azaihu roi sheimatze hamalach hasichli etzla lanchoso, right? Lahadricho ulalvoso, right? So only when it's set in the proper way, and he's going to explain how that happens, is it possible that the great king, right, meaning God, should then be able to lead this body and allow the body to function in the way that it does. Kol od seder zenishakayim, as long as this order is proper. But if the order is gone, if the physical body isn't in order, then who ozevoso? Then this spirit leaves, right? If we eat too much cholesterol and smoke too much and drink too much, eventually our heart gives out. Our physical body isn't getting what it needs, and poof, it goes away. The spirit goes away, and we become just a body. It would seem to a fool, right? What would a fool think? He would think, like, what would happen if you stopped eating, right? You would die, right? If you stopped drinking, you would die. If you stopped breathing, you would die, right? So a fool would think, well, how is it that this life spirit that's within me stays within me? Well, it must be, but it needs food, right? It needs food to eat. It needs drink. It needs air to breathe. As long as I have food and I have drink and I have air, right? my spirit is within me, and if I stop eating, right, then the spirit leaves me, then I die. But we all know intuitively that that's not true, right? 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 This special spiritual matter that's within us that gives us this life force, right? It wants to give good to everything. It wants to give that life force and spirit throughout our bodies. Right? When something is ready to accept its leadership, right? The leadership of that life force or God, when it's talking about the Jewish people, right? So who eno moneazos ve'eno posik milashpia lavar. He will give that light. He will give that special spiritual force, right? Chochma v'yashra, that wisdom, and his residing within us. But when the special order that he requires of us is ruined, then he does not, then that person's body and our community doesn't accept that special light from God. Right? That special spirit is not getting affected by our eating, right? So therefore, and not the bottom line so far is what he's saying is that both when it comes to our bodies and when it comes to our community and our relationship with God, right, which the temple is representing, right, it requires all of it, we need to keep our bodies in shape, right, in order that God will reside within us. But God clearly, and we need to keep our bodies in shape in order that our spirit, that our neshama, that our soul lives, right? If we stop feeding our body, our soul will have no place to live. So in the same way, when we do all of this avoda, when we do this service and worship in the temple, the spirit, meaning in this case, God's Holy Spirit, right, doesn't need our carbon. He doesn't get fed by it, right? He doesn't eat it. He doesn't take the reach nichoach, the smell, and breathe it. But rather, what we're doing is we are creating an atmosphere of holiness within the Jewish people by performing these services so that God's flame will reside within us and, so to speak, pump this holiness and this life force throughout the people, right? So what he's really doing right here, and he's going to go into this in more detail, but it's saying that by going through these actions and these motions, we're creating an environment of holiness, and we're nourishing us as a people, so that God resides, his spirit resides within us, and then he can give us that special life force of spirituality that we require. Jeffrey, I see your hand is up, so go ahead.
So this is just a quick question. I was looking ahead. Does the Kuzari tell the rabbi that the temple was destroyed 1,000 years earlier? So how could the gods still be in existence under this since there's no longer any sacrifice?
That's a very, very good question. I mean, the short answer is that now we have other things to replace the temple, right? We have the synagogue, we have prayer, we have learning Torah, we have mitzvot, right? So this will extend to everything we do to worship God. In order to have God be shoreh within us, right, we need to nurture our bodies, right? And in this case, it's nurture the Jewish people and people, and by extension, all people, so that God can reside within us. Yosef, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I doubled classed at the beginning, so we were just learning that with Rav Vital in the Rambam, and the Rambam was before the Kuzari, right?
No, the Rambam was after the Kuzari, but he never quotes the Kuzari, so we don't know if he read it or he ignored it. but he was after the Kuzari.
Okay, yeah, because it's almost word for word what we just learned with Rav Vital.
Okay, nice. All right, very good. So kol hanimtza. So I'm going to continue. So kol hanimtza b'seder avoda. So everything that we find in the order of the worship in the temple, sheirut, the service, the korbanot, the sacrifice, the incense, the songs, the eating and the drinking, mitohar mukudash b'ofen mirabi. It is specially holy and has to be done in a sanctified, holy way. Nemerlav avodas Hashem. Right. It is all referred to as the worship of God or the service of God. It's referred to as the bread of God. Okay, and similar languages like this. These languages are only a hint to to satisfying his what he wants from us, right? This is what God wants us to do as a nation, right? In order to make our nation proper. And also he wants our priests to be involved in these actions. Right? So that they al derech mashal, so that he will be accepted as a guest among us, right? For example, so that he can reside among us in order to give honor to us. So long as we are in that holy state. Above and beyond, not because he wants to get benefit from our food, just like our soul and our body doesn't get benefit from our food, but it only resides within us when our body is in its proper order. But the food is for ourselves, not for him. So in a way, what he's kind of saying is that all of the worship that we do for God, including the sacrifices, is what makes us. We do those things to make ourselves better, right? So that God should reside among us. Now he's going to get into some more details of medieval medicine. So we'll just have to stick with it for a few minutes, right? Just like the Ikol hakeva, the digestion which occurs in the stomach, the hakaved, and in the liver, he assumed that digestion takes place in the liver. Takin, right? V'chein takin atzolol shebo, right? Balev yatzolom and atzolol baruach. So I don't even know how to translate half of this, but give me a second. I'm just going to look in the in Korobkin's thing here. But the bottom line is it makes it clear. It cleans out, the bad stuff. And I'm sorry, I lost my place here.
Hi, Linda. It never showed.
Oh yeah, the food is that it's purified. That's what it is. It's purified by the liver, and then it's purified even more. And the purification that occurs of the spirit and of the air in the heart, azay takinim halev, right, which then gets which sustains the heart, right? Haruach v'amach v'shaloso mazon. All of this is getting from that food. V'chein takinim evri ha'ikol v'yesar evar ma'idei aruchos avam aleim derech ha'arkim, through the veins and the arteries. The blood is coming to keep healthy the digestive system. So the bottom line is that all of the health in general, the balance of health would be appropriate in order so that it's now ready to accept and receive the mind, the soul that of the intellect. Right? Which is itself, it has no physical existence. It's not a physical thing, similar to the angels. Right? Because that's what the angels are. This nefesh hasichlis, the soul of the intellect, right, resides within the body, a residing in such a way that it rules over the body, right? It's the intellect that decides what to do. It decides I should walk to this store, I should breathe, I should do whatever it is that I do, right? Lo shrias makom, but it's not the kind of it doesn't reside in a place. It doesn't have an address, right? But in a similar way, he wants to say, obviously, God doesn't reside in a place. God resides within the people in the sense that he is the spiritual power through which the events that happen to the people occur. But the soul doesn't eat any of this food. It is above that. In a similar way, the spiritual force, it only resides on the soul which is ready to accept this intellect. So now it's getting even deeper into medieval medicine. And remember, I told you about that innate heat, Galen's theory of innate heat, right? So the soul is attached to the body through the spirit of the innate heat, the innate heat that resides within the body. Haruach hativ. I think Karabkin got this wrong. If I get it great, lo yuchokim v'hanefesh lo tischaber on the top of page 190. Beruach cham hativi. He kind of jumps over it, but I don't think he was aware of the Galen's innate heat, or I'm not sure. But regardless, that's what it means, right? Haruach hativis zekuka b'hachrach, and this innate spirit, right, which is this power of innate heat, is as pure as possible, right? And it comes at it, but it needs lemabua. It needs a source. It needs a source shabohi tischaber kimo, with through which it attaches itself, right? How is the innate heat attach itself? Just like a flame attaches itself to a wick, something needs to attach the flame to the wick, right? So the heart is like the wick, and what makes that innate heat stick to the heart, right? We know that the innate heat resides within the heart, but what makes the innate heat stay there? And when someone dies, the innate heat obviously left. So halev zakuk l'chomer, the lave needs something physical. It needs blood, and the blood Adam comes. Where does the blood come from? It comes from the digestive tract. That's what they understood. They understood that blood was made in the digestive tract. So it needs a stomach, it needs a liver, and all the other things, the guts, so on, that are involved in making blood. So Cain has zakuk halev l'reya. The heart needs the lungs. Lagaron lap, it needs the nose and the mouth. Right, because it needs to cool off the innate heat, right? That's why the breath comes into the chest in order to cool off the heat and blow off the smoke that's coming out of the innate heat. L'shem siluk adfei hamazon hu zakuk leivarim kigon kochos dochem veivar yatzov hashesen, and also the we need our ways to get rid of waste and so on. So within the body, all of these things are all working together to do all of this. A person needs to be able to move. He needs to ambulate from place to place in order to get what he needs and to run away from what's damaging. In some cases, I'm just skipping the Hebrew and just reading through it. So you need to have hands, you need to have feet, and you need to have yoatzim, you need to have advisors. Mabchinim, hamazirim, right? Things that warn you and remind you of the things that are dangerous, right? And they remind you of the things that you need. So you have to have memories that say, hey, you got to eat dinner tonight or you're going to be hungry. Don't go down that road because there's a gang of bandits down that road, right? And all those memories are residing in your brain, right? And how do you know what's out there? Through your senses, right? And all of these things, and the place of the senses is in the head, is in the brain, together within the heart, and so on. Remember, I said that they did not understand that the heart. They thought of the heart as a place where emotions, feelings, senses resided. So in a similar way, the entire body is set up in such a way that the heart should rule over the body. This is a very important. Remember, if we have to screw on our medieval medicine mind, right? The heart is running the body. The heart is from which the entire body is being controlled. This actually has an interesting aside for those that are getting bored of medieval medicine. This has halachic ramifications, right? Because it blew up in a major controversy of the 20th century, which I'll tell you, the major controversy is how to determine halachic time of death, right? Is it heart death or is it brain death? That's the in modern science, once the brain is totally gone and has no functionality whatsoever, then in modern medicine, that's considered dead. right? And the reason is obvious, because we know that the brain is what controls everything. And if there's no brain, there's nothing. A heart you can replace. You can transplant another heart. You could even put in a machine for a short period of time. One of these days, someone's going to figure out a mechanical heart that actually works. There are some that, work a little bit. Regardless, the body, a liver you can replace, the lungs you can replace, everything you can replace. You can't replace a brain, right? If you replace a brain, right, it doesn't happen. However, halachically, this is an extensive history behind this, and way too much for me to handle to deal with now. But it became accepted over time, right, that we determine death it's based on the Gemara, where it talks about, you see if someone's breathing, if God forbid on Shabbos they're under a pile of rubble, right? If they're not breathing anymore, so then they're gone, right? But there's a lot of the medieval understanding of that was because when you're not breathing anymore, that means the heart's not beating anymore, right? And if the heart's not beating anymore, the heart is what is so on. But now you and I both know, if God forbid you were to walk by on the street and somebody falls down and their heart's not beating, what do? Right? You don't declare them dead. You perform CPR as fast as you can, right? Because as long as you can pump the blood through their body and get them to the hospital fast enough, you might be able to save them, right? Right. So the heart not beating anymore today is simply not it doesn't make sense in modern medicine to define death based on heart death. So there's tons of literature on this, and it's a tremendous way but one of the things that doesn't get discussed that often, but there's a great article out there that was written by a friend of mine named Dr. Eddie Reichman, Rabbi Dr. Eddie Reichman, who's a big Talmud Chacham, and he's a physician and ER physician in New York. Some asked me later, and I'll try to find that. I have the article in my archives somewhere, where he shows how the halachic conception of heart death as the halachic determination of death is not really a Torah thing. It came because the poskim over those centuries understood the heart to be where everything is centered, right? So they understood, therefore, but rather in modern times, brain death would make much more sense. So without me putting my head into this tremendous halachic controversy, which still rages to this day, I wanted to say how this idea here, what we're reading in the Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, is you would understand why a person like him would have assumed that when the heart goes, everything goes. The heart is where this spirit of life is residing, is attached to the burning wick, and all the food, everything that we eat, everything that we do in our lives are allowing the spirit of life to attach to our heart, so that the heart can pump the spirit of life throughout the body. So you can understand why a medieval Jewish thinker would assume that heart death is the definition of death. Let's move on. So in a similar way, just like that's true about a body, that's true about the Musuderes ha'uma hachayelokis, the godly nation, right? Right, like Yoshua says, "Bezos teidon ki el chai b'kirbechem." With this, you will know that the living God is within you, because God is within us as a people. When did that flame come down from the heaven to land on the altar? It came down when God was satisfied with the way we were living and the way we were acting. That was the sign that God accepted our worship, our service. Of all of the beings that exist in this world, all of the physical beings, fire is the most pure and the most spiritual. I don't know if that's the right translation, but the most pure and the most special. Where does it reside? On the fats of the sacrifices. And the smoke that arises from the incense, and so on. Where does fire resides? Where there's fats, where there's oils, right? Just like the flame, the innate heat that's within us attaches itself to adin b'shumani. It attaches itself to a place where there's fats. Siva isale, right? Therefore, God commanded al mizbach ha'olav yam mizbach ha'ketores, on the altar where we bring the sacrifices, and the altar where we bring the incense, and the menorah, and on everything, and so on. All of these things, kedei shetidbak bo ha'esh hagli ha'mifresemes, was in order that that fire should be able to have something to attach itself to. Mizbach hazahav noad le'esh musteres yoser vadina yoser, the special mizbeach, the golden altar, which was within the holier part of the mizbeach, is for a special fire, which was where mostly it was just incense, with few small exceptions. That was the mizbeach haketoris, which was only for incense. HaMenorah, the menorah, was even more special. The shulchan, where the table of the showbread, that's where sheyidbeku bo hapirion matovos hagufnios. That's where where God influences with us, giving us our our physical needs, our parnasa, and so on. Right? If you want to get wisdom, you look towards the menorah, because that's more special and refined. If you want to get wealthy, you look at the shulchan, the table, because that's where you get physical sustenance and wealth from. And all of this was in honor of this most holy, which was where the Aron Kodesh was, the holy ark, which was like the heart, as the lungs settle over the heart, so too the kruvim, are kind of cover over the Aron, over the ark. And that's why we need to have all kinds of objects, right, that are there. So with like the laver and the shovels and the spoons and the plate bowls and so on and so forth. We needed to have something where it should reside to protect it, a building, either the Mishkan, the Oel, and its coverings, and to protect that was the courtyard around it. And you need people to carry it, and God chose the Levites to carry it, right? And among them, he chose Elazar to be in charge of them, to be in charge of the even more important things, and so on. And all of these things were necessary for a place where that special flame should be able to reside. Even the light of prophecy came through and resided within the Urim Metumim, which was in the breastplate that the Kohen Gadol wore. To the even more special families. Remember, the Rabbi Yehuda Halevi had no problem making a hierarchy of special families, right? His understanding was not very, wouldn't fly very well in modern democratic societies. But just that's the way it is. We've seen this already. We've discussed this before, and we just have to hear out what he has to say. And they were the children of Kahas who carried those special things, and then the children of Gershon were a little bit lower level than them. They carried the Mishkan and the Ol Moed, and then the ones that were less than them were the children of Merari, and they carried the beams, and so on and so forth. All of this was done in a special way and with God's special wisdom. Eino posek v'lo gozer chalila shetachliso shel sheira zeh hi haseder shetzianti. And we can't do this in any other way, right? And I'm not, God forbid, saying, right? Ein ni posek. I'm sorry, I read that word wrong. I said ein no, and that's led me in the wrong direction. Ein ni posek. I am not saying that, God forbid, that the purpose of everything is only for what I stated, right? However, there's even more holier things. And now this is really key. I want you to pay a lot of attention to this, because when we talk about Rabbi Yehuda Halevi being a predecessor for the mystical tradition, I'm saying predecessor was not really totally accurate, because obviously there was a mystical tradition that goes back all the way to the days of the Talmud and even before that. But Rabbi Yehuda Halevi's thinking, he says, I'm giving you this beautiful reasoning and understanding of why we're doing the karbanos. However, I want you to know that there's other higher reasons than that are hidden to us, right? So that all the things that we're doing have higher, loftier purposes that we don't necessarily see or think. Think a little bit about what he's saying and what that means to doing a mitzvah today, right? you're doing a mitzvah, and you might say, this is the reason why I do. I eat matzah on Pesach because, right, I want to remember the bread of affliction that my ancestors ate, and so on. But there's another holier, higher reason that I don't even know that's up there, right? Now, I'm sure you've heard this kind of thinking, and it's very an important way of thinking within our religion and our tradition. It is not, definitively not, the way Rambam would have explained it, right? This is where Rabbi Yehuda Halevi goes in a very different kind of direction. But I'm pointing that out because this is one of the crucial places where he does this, but it's not the only place. V'hu Torah Melikim, because it's the laws that God gave us. The bottom line is he gave us these rules. So I'm explaining this wonderful explanation, but it's even higher than that. Misha Mekabelosa Kabbalah Shlema, and somebody, and listen carefully to what he's saying, someone who accepts this, Mibli lit yamer shu somech alasechal, or Mibli lit chakem, and thinks to himself that I'm doing this in such when I don't understand why I'm doing it, and I don't think I'm wiser than the Torah. I'm accepting this as wisdom that's beyond me and beyond my ability to know or understand it. Mu'ula Yoser is in an even higher level than someone who relies on his mind and his intellect to try to understand something. So I'm giving you a reason. But if the only reason why, if we were around in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, if the only reason why you went to the Beis Hamikdash and brought your sacrifice and did all the service and worship as prescribed by the Torah, and you did it because of the explanation I gave you, because it made sense to you, because you liked my explanation and it made sense, you would be on a lower level than the guy who says, I don't even understand why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because there's some lofty high purpose that God himself did, and I have no way of ever really understanding it, and therefore I'm doing it for that reason, okay? But don't answer this question out loud, but would Rambam have agreed with that statement? I just said that, and you'll tell me later in a minute what you think. Right? However, someone who, right, who comes down from that high level, right? In other words, he realizes that there's holier and loftier reasons for the mitzvos. But then he comes down and says, right, mutav lo she'ifna l'chachma. It's okay for him to then say, okay, but even though I don't really understand the lofty reasons, I can still understand why I'm doing this. So even though I know that when I eat this matzah on Pesach and I do this mitzvah, I'm accomplishing all sorts of lofty, holy, beautiful things that I don't even know or understand, because God told me to do this in this way on this night at this time and this amount, and I have to make the matzah exactly like this, right? I do all of these things for holy reasons which I'll never understand. But I can still understand that there's an importance to matzah, right? I can still come back down to earth after I fly off in the lofty heavens above the clouds. I can come back down to my Seder table and sit in my physical chair with my actual family and then say, well, there's still a nice reason to eat matzah because, and then go through the reason. And rather than getting lost in all kinds of doubts and letting people make up all kinds of nonsense, well, maybe they eat this bread because of, make up some kind of nonsense, right? But rather, there are important reasons that we can gather from them, as long as but while at the same time recognizing that there's loftier reasons. So I just want to summarize, really for myself, but for all of us, what he just said. So he portrayed a picture, right, of the service and worship in the temple, right, and the sacrifices that are being brought as creating an atmosphere and an environment where God can come reside and then reside within us, right? And by reside within us, that means be the life force, the spiritual force that sustains the people, the Jewish people specifically, and the world in general. And all of these things that we're doing are meant to remind us of how we all, we live our lives in order to sustain that soul that's within us. So all the physical things that we do are meant in order to create an atmosphere that spirituality can then reside within us and then control our lives. And then he also stated that even though this is a nice reason, there's still a higher reason. And that makes me think, and I'm going to say this straight, it makes me wonder if he was not satisfied with his own reason a little bit, a tiny little bit, right? And therefore he says, but not so much because he's not satisfied because he thinks it's a bad reason, but he wasn't satisfied because it kind of realized that even after his beautiful explanation of the Chazar King's question, in which he attempted to come up with this wonderful answer, which has all these wonderful images and comparisons and everything, we still don't really understand it, and we still have to end up saying, well, there's loftier and higher reasons that are beyond us, right? Because when push comes to shove, this is true about a lot of the mitzvot. Like you may come up with lofty explanations and understandings, and then you go back after you listen to a rabbi's sermon and he gives a whole beautiful explanation, and everything seems to make so much sense. This compares to this, and this compares to that, and this matches this, and this matches that, and it all is ingenious, and everything is great, and you're all wowed. And then you go home and you start to say it over to somebody else and say, it still doesn't make any sense. The bottom line, why? And this is really a flaw in but he's saying that's okay because there are higher, holier reasons that we'll never know or understand. So, all right. So I'm going to stop here and allow for questions. We're going to continue on the subject of carbonate, right? A little bit, but yeah. Anyway, so we also had a nice lesson in medieval medicine. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm far from an expert in medieval medicine, but it was a time in my life when I was interested in the subject. And this Dr. Eddie Reichman, I told you about it, his article on time of death really kicked me off into that whole field. So it was years ago I read a lot about the subject. If anyone really wants to read on the history of medicine, if you want a really good book, there's a book. It's called Doctors, and it was written by Sherwin Nuland, Nuland, Sherwin Nuland. It's a big fat book, but it's like little biographies of the doctors, starting from Hippocrates all the way to modern day. And what kind of people, little biographies to get an understanding of who they were, when they lived, and what they did, and how they fought, and how they advanced medicine in their time, and how eventually we came to the modern medicine we know today. But it's a spectacular book. It makes for a very entertaining reading because it's beautifully written and it's really interesting. And you really learn how medicine has advanced literally over the past, I guess, I don't know, close to 3,000 years. I don't know when Hippocrates lived. I don't know, probably 2,500 years ago, maybe. I don't know, give or take a few hundred, something like that. But since then, anyway, I highly recommend it. I've read it once years ago, and I've read it again a few years later. And anyway, if you want to learn about Galen, then his chapter on Galen is out of this world. Very worthwhile. Anyway,
I could only find an audio, not written.
You couldn't find it. So then listen to it. It's worth it. I mean, if you're interested in the history of medicine, and you want one book, that's your book, No,
I'm talking about Rabbi Reichman.
Eddie Reichman.
So on YU, they have 49 classes of his. Most of them are audio.
Okay, the book that came out, in that book, one of the chapters it's either the article that I'm talking about on heart death, or it's an adaptation from the article, but it's a chapter in his book. I cannot. You should, if you Google it while we're talking and tell us what the name of the book is. But Eddie Reichman, a lot of interesting things to say. He's a very, very knowledgeable man, and it doesn't need me to say that. But his article on heart death really that clicked something in my soul when it comes to it's the interface between medicine and halacha and so on. All right, I see there's a hand up. Jeffrey, go ahead. We can't hear you. I think you need to unmute yourself.
The Maimonides explanation had its problems that you had outlined some year or two ago, because to encapsulate it, this is an inheritance from paganism, from primitive man, the Neanderthals. They would do sacrifices. So to make it easier for a whole people, we carried it over. but ultimately we hope it goes away. And I always found that a problem because you may recall when we got to the red heifer, as I recall, you had told me, and we had read, well, he didn't come up with it, but he knew there was a rational explanation. He just couldn't come up with it. So if you're trying to explain the sacrifices to a non-Jew, Maimonides has its problems. It's not convincing. I think the Kuzari's approach, or the rabbi there, was much more imaginative, and it's much easier to accept than this idea. Well, there are all these things, but the mind can always grasp them, but I can't explain it because there are some things you have to take on faith. And this is, I think, a much better way to explain this to non-Jews. So that's my votes for whatever it's worth.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I'm glad you said that.
I have a take on it. Yeah. So, he realized after he went through all of his explanation about the fire in the heart and blah, 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 which is all interesting and based on medieval medicine. I think what he's saying is he realized that his explanation may not be correct because you could look at it one way. You could say he thought that, there are things that we just can't understand that may be happening that we just can't comprehend. Or you might look at it in a different way. You might look at it in a way of saying his explanations are good at this point in time, but he understands that in the future we may see other things or discover other things or understand in a different way so that we become enlightened in a different way and understand these things in a new light and in a new understanding. And therefore that may be, instead of just a mystical reason that we don't understand, it may be that future understanding and enlightenment may be what he's thinking about. Now, he may not have been it, but I sort of like that idea.
I could see yeah.
Yeah, and so, I'm thinking, again, I could go down the Maimonides tract and, where I'm going to go there, but I'm not going to do that. I sort of want to stick with his philosophy and sort of interpret it in a different way that I might like to think about it, that we become more enlightened and then understand. So it's either you understand it as this was a paganistic thing that we brought to our people because we couldn't just transition them immediately because that they wouldn't be able to handle that, or you can do it in the way that he did it and advance it with future enlightenment that we would understand better why people do what they do. So I just throw that in.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I would attribute to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi the idea that we may advance in our medical knowledge. Like he was really worried about.
Not only
Maybe
medical knowledge, I didn't just mean medical knowledge, but our understanding of what.
Okay.
Not medical knowledge. Our understanding of what these things meant. Future interpretations, future scholars might look at it differently, and then finally come to a better understanding. I don't mean medically.
I gotcha. Okay. Any other comments, questions, observations, criticisms?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Barry. Wait, I see two hands. Okay. Barry rose his hand, so he goes first.
It's good to know how Yehuda Halevi approached this, but I'm thinking about how God may have been learning about human capabilities over time. He learned some of the bad corruption that we were prone to. He also may have learned other higher skills that we had. And why should we rule out that God didn't anticipate that he could turn it over to us to, modify our rituals and our customs on the basis of what we'll learn about how the world, the natural laws, the natural functioning of the world, and that we'll still be having the purpose of being closer to divine inspiration. But why don't we accept the responsibility that, the Lord anticipating turning things more over to us to change our rituals? I don't know. On Shabbat, I really am not happy with the Shabbat Musaf, where I look back with so much fondness to the days of the Korbanot. The heck with that. So pardon my French.
No, you're expressing an understandable emotion. You can speak French if you want. In terms of what you said is touching on the question of the Yediya and Bechira. On the one hand, we have free choice, right? So on the one hand, we can choose, and God's not the one who chooses for us, right? We choose our actions in our life. On the other hand, it's to say that God, there's some kind of lack in his knowledge is edging in the in the wrong direction. So exactly how those two interplay, we had this deep discussions about this from the Rambam's perspective, and just to give the short version of the Rambam's answer is just that we don't understand how God's knowledge works. Of course, he knows everything, but his knowledge is not our knowledge. And how it is that these two things interplay, is something that we'll never understand, right? But know that we do have free choice, and as far as the things in Judaism that don't work for us, like the carbonot, and like especially when we daven, especially the tefillah of Musaf, like you said, there's a lot of things that we read in the Torah that are hard to digest, and we learned the Rambam and how he understood it, and now we learn the Kuzari and how he understood it, and it's up to us to keep learning and try to figure out how we understand it. We might take their approach and drag it out a little farther. I don't know if we'll ever get there, but it's worth, if you have a chance. Rav Kook dealt with this significantly in the work that was not published in his lifetime. It was called Lenevuche Hadar, to the lost ones of our generation, or the perplexed of our generation. He wrote an update to the guide for the perplexed, and he deals with this issue of the parts of the Torah they don't work with our sensibilities, specifically carbonot. He had his approach, which we can do. We can devote another lecture to that. Maybe we'll pick that book after the Kuzari, maybe. But wait, Jack, I see you're saying something, but you're still muted.
Yeah, what is his name?
Rav Kook, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook. He was the first chief rabbi of Israel, one of the greatest rabbis of the early 20th century.
How do you spell his last name? I'm sorry.
Kook. And his book is called Lenevuche Hadar, to the perplexed of the generation. There might be other translate. There are English copies out there. It's a very there's a lot of things that are worthwhile studying, but that's a big one. But specifically, that the emotion that Barry mentioned, we read Musaf and we talk about slaughtering lambs, and I'm not really interested in slaughtering lambs. How in this century, and he was talking in the beginning of the 20th century, which is close enough to our century. It was a time when these sentiments were, a few hundred years ago, it might not have bothered people, but it was already bothering him. and
I don't know about you, but with me, I come to those sections and I just read them, but I don't internalize them because they don't mean anything spiritual to me. That's the way I look at it. I don't know how other people do it, but that's sort of the way. I can't incorporate it in my mind to believe that this is helpful to me.
Right.
So,
well, maybe Rabbi Yehuda Levi's discussion gives us a little bit of a path. I acknowledge that we did not in depth answer that question. It's a very big problem. It's a major issue, and we should. But learning Rabbi Yehuda Levi and learning Rambam, like we did in the last lecture, is a good start in our study and our quest for making meaning out of those rituals that we don't practice anymore, but we do study them, read about them, and even, according to the words of Musaf, yearn for them. Right. So
that's what I'm saying. But I think
right.
You're right that if we don't necessarily incorporate it, if we understand it more, we might feel more comfortable with it.
We're on the path. I think we're on the path. And learning Rabbi Yehuda Levi is a very important part of that path, because to understand it, you have to go through how the Jewish philosophers over the ages dealt with those questions. We just read how Rabbi Yehuda Levi did, and there's a lot more. And we'll learn a lot more. We have to, Nachmanides would be very important for us to analyze how he dealt with the carbonot. He had a very different approach than Rambam and Rabbi Yehuda Levi. And there are others, which we'll do over time, I promise. We have many years. If God gives me life and energy to keep doing this, we have many years to study a lot more. But anyway, I'll take one more question and then we'll close up.
The question observation. You many times have suggested, since this preceded Maimonides, the question has been posed in Maimonides, look at this, did he know about it? And I'd like to give you proof that if he did look at it, and I think he might have because it's 100
Right.
before it,
Right.
if he had, I'll give you the English translation of what you've just summarized. After all, the sacrificial order is part of God's Torah, and one who accepts the Torah completely without first rationalizing it with his intellect is greater than one who rationalizes and investigates everything.
Right.
And if Maimonides were to ever read that sentence, I think he would throw the whole thing in the trash can, burn it, and he would never want to hear anything from this book again. So I think that's proof.
Well, yeah. I mean, I will say I didn't say it in as dramatic a way as you did, but I did say that this is not how Rambam would have. He would have not liked that sentence at all. But that's why we're learning this. I want you to see all these approaches. We'll all find different paths to God, but this is one of the reasons why I chose this book to learn after Rambam. Like, we need to see this contrast. Next time you're listening to a rabbi's sermon about a philosophical subject, think which tradition he is drawing from.
Yeah.
All right.
So did Martin have a question? I mean,
Martin. Yeah, you did want to say something. Now you're quiet. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if the term reach nichoach is that used for anything other than the korbanot? I mean, there's a lot of very good mitzvot and activities and important things that we're supposed to do, but that you could apply that to. But it's only, as far as I know, it's only the sacrifices that's applied to.
That term, as it's stated, reach nichoach, as far as I know, is only in that context. The word reach, though, obviously is talking to as a smell. That's everywhere. That refers to all kinds of things.
Pleasing.
Yeah. I don't know.
The first one was actually before the Torah was given. It was Noach. When he sacrificed after the Mabul, it says that Hashem smelled that pleasant smell.
Yeah.
So
and
it
the
proves that
relationship
it's
between
like
reach
beyond
and ruach.
just the law, because any goy who brings Solomon asked for this in his prayer, that anybody wants to sacrifice, even if they worship other gods, that Hashem will accept it. But the rabbis or the Kohanim limited it to the olah, only a burnt offering. The shlamim is basically a covenant of peace between us and Hashem. So that's our personal right. They can bring shlamim to other gods, but not in the temple.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, thank you very much for participating again. Mirza Shem, next week we will be back together on February 4th, God willing, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks a lot.
Thanks all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.